everybody and welcome back to the Wire Barn. I'm Maddie and today we're going to be talking about heat shrink tubing and how and where it's used. We will be going over what heat shrink is for, the types of heat shrink available, and I'll be showing a demonstration on how to properly apply heat shrink. So let's get into it. So what is heat shrink tubing? Well, it's a polymer sleeve that looks like a piece of tubing, and when you apply heat to it, it shrinks down to a predictable size. It has a 2-to-1 shrink ratio, which means it shrinks down to half of its original diameter. There are many other shrink ratios available, including 3-to-1, 6-to-1, etc. Heat shrink comes in adhesive and non-adhesive types. Non-adhesive is appropriate for most general applications. Adhesive shrink is often used in most humid or wet environments, such as the marine industry. Heat shrink also comes in many colors, with black being the most popular, followed by red. And it is also available in clear. This can be useful in cases when you want to be able to see a particular component, such as a resistor for inspection or quality control purposes. Heat shrink also comes in many sizes. It is important to choose a heat shrink that is sufficiently larger than what you are installing it over, while not going too big, otherwise the heat shrink will not be able to shrink down enough to make a proper seal. The idea is to get a maximum amount of shrink while still shrinking all the way down, because heat shrink gets thicker as it shrinks, and you get more protection that way. There is very little to no change in the length after or before heat shrinking. Only the diameter changes. Here's a fun fact. Even though it's called heat shrink tubing, the tubing doesn't actually shrink. Kind of crazy, right? It merely returns to its original diameter. When heat shrink is manufactured, it is stretched over a mandrel. 2-to-1 heat shrink is stretched double its original size, and 3-to-1 is triple its original size. When it's being heated, instead of shrinking, it returns to its pre-shrinked diameter. And this is also referred to as the recovery diameter. Now that we know a little bit about heat shrink tubing, let's get into a demonstration on how to properly apply heat shrink.
So as you can see right here, we have our piece of soldered wire that we are going to put the heat shrink tube over. And I already went and I put the heat shrink tube on before I twisted the wires together and soldered them. If you don't know how to solder wires, you can go check out our last video where I explain how to solder wires together. So once they're soldered, you can slide the heat shrink tube over the soldered piece like this. And this is when we can grab our heat gun. Now before we get into heat shrinking, there are a couple of precautions that you want to take before starting. So the heat gun does stay hot for up to 20 minutes after you turn it off, and it gets to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so make sure you take caution of that. And the heat shrink joint also stays hot as well, and the adhesive that oozes out of it. Make sure you apply the heat shrink tube before you close the joint off, otherwise you won't be able to get it on. Safety glasses are also a must when you're using your heat gun. When you are heat shrinking, don't put your fingers too close to the gun itself. Also be sure to watch your surroundings, make sure there are no plastic bags or anything that could possibly catch fire. Notice how I'm also keeping the heat gun up in the air instead of putting it sideways. That way nothing on this side of the heat gun could catch fire. Keep it up in the air, nothing above will catch fire. And lastly, no flammable liquids of any kind should be around the heat gun. You're going to want to move the piece of wire around the heat gun and heat both sides of the shrink so it shrinks uniformly. So let's do it. Once you're done, it should look like this.
And there we have it. One more thing before we go, I got the barn joke of the week for you. Are you ready? Why do ants never get sick? Because they have antibodies. Let me know if you laughed, because that was pretty funny. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below on what you want us to talk about in future videos. And lastly, make sure to check out wirebarn.com for all your wiring needs. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I see you.